They told me to sign a confession that would destroy my life, so my sibling could stay rich. I signed it, but not the way they think. Sign it, Evan. My father's voice was low and urgent, the kind he used when pretending calm meant control. He slid the pen toward me across the polished dining table, his fingers trembling just enough to betray the fear underneath. It's for the family, he added quickly. Your sister has a future. You're strong. You can endure this. My mother stood by the window, her back to me, watching snow pile against the glass as if the world outside could save her from what was happening inside this room. She didn't turn around. The investor is already downstairs, she said flatly. We don't have time for emotions. Just do it. My sister, Lyle, leaned forward, eyes sharp, impatient. Stop making this harder than it has to be. Be useful for once. I looked down at the paper. A confession. Typed neatly. Carefully worded. Every sentence designed to sound voluntary. A full admission of responsibility for $50 million siphoned from company accounts over 4 years. A crime I did not commit. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I signed. The moment the pen left the page, Lyle snatched the document from the table like it might disappear if he didn't move fast enough. Relief broke through his panic, twisting into something dangerously close to pride. Finally. The room exhaled. No one thanked me. I just looked at him. The sibling who had used my identity, my access, my silence, now ready to let me take the fall so his life could continue uninterrupted. Before I tell you whose name I actually signed, and why the ink drying was the beginning of their collapse, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one expected to fix everything, simply because your family decided you were expendable? My name is Evan Calder. I'm 29 years old. In my family, gravity followed one rule. Lyle was the center. I existed to orbit him. He was praised. Protected. Positioned. I was adjusted. Explained away. Sacrificed quietly. When we were children, my father used to say it openly, like a principle instead of a cruelty. Lyle carries the name, he'd say. You carry the weight. I was 12 the first time Lyle emptied a wallet that didn't belong to him. When the money vanished, I was the one called into the room. My mother brushed my hair while I stood shaking, telling me softly that families survive because someone learns to absorb damage. Support structures don't get credit, she whispered. They just keep everything from falling apart. They truly believed this was love. To them, I wasn't a son, I was a buffer. So when rumors spread that I was unstable, unfocused, unreliable, they never corrected them. My father told colleagues I had episodes. My mother told neighbors I struggled with direction. It was convenient. It made everything easier to justify. While they told the world I was drifting, I was working. Quietly. They thought my late nights were wasted on screens. They didn't know those screens showed live markets across 3 time zones. They mocked my games, unaware I'd written a predictive model that flagged commodity shortages months before analysts caught on. They saw a man doing nothing. I was becoming invisible on purpose. Invisibility buys time. While Lyle chased status, cars he leased, ventures that existed only on paper, I was buying obligations. Every emergency loan the company took. I acquired it through intermediaries. Every short-term bond meant to cover losses. I absorbed it. I didn't own success. I owned mistakes. By the time they called me into that dining room, they were already standing on ground I controlled. They just didn't know it yet. My father tapped the table impatiently. This fixes everything, he muttered. The investor sees stability. Lyle steps in. We survive. And our grandfather? I asked quietly. My sister didn't even hesitate. He stays comfortable, as long as you follow through. There it was. The leverage they thought would break me. What they didn't know was that earlier that morning, I had finalized the purchase of the care facility's debt. The building. The contracts. The leverage. They believed love made me weak. They were wrong. I just need one thing, I said, lowering my voice. Lyle frowned. What now? If I'm giving up my freedom, I said, forcing a tremor into my words, I want to see it. I want to see you officially take over. Silence. Sign the executive papers, I continued. Before the investor walks in. My mother rolled her eyes. Sentimental nonsense. But Lyle hesitated, not out of fear, but hunger. He wanted that signature more than anything. And that was the moment the trap began to close. Lyle didn't reach for the documents right away. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it told me everything. Not doubt. Desire. He wanted the title. He wanted the moment. He wanted to see his name printed where he believed it always belonged. The company. The legacy. The future that had been built on quiet accommodations people like me were never meant to question. Why? He asked finally, narrowing his eyes. Why does that matter now? I lowered my gaze, letting my shoulders slump just enough to look defeated. Because I need to know I didn't destroy myself for nothing. That did it. Lyle had never resisted an audience. Especially one where he could look down at me. Fine, he scoffed. If it shuts you up. My father nodded in approval, already halfway back into denial. Make it quick. The investor is early. Lyle pulled the leather binder from his briefcase, thick, embossed, expensive. He laid it beside my confession like a coronation set piece. 2 documents. 1 crown. 1 grave. He didn't notice my hands stop shaking. The executive appointment papers were standard, at least on the surface. Authority. Responsibility. Full control. Full liability. That last part mattered more than he realized. He skimmed. Barely. Signed. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet room. He lifted the page, smiled, and held it up like proof of conquest. It's done, he said. I'm in charge. I looked at the date. The time. The signature. Then I exhaled. Yes, I said softly. Now it's real. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Insistent. My mother jumped. My father swore under his breath. He's early, my father said. This is bad. Panic rippled through the room. My mother rushed toward me, gripping my arm too tightly. Kitchen. Now. Don't be seen. Lyle straightened his jacket, already rehearsing confidence. Go. If he sees you, everything falls apart. I didn't move. Instead, I stood. What are you doing? My father snapped. I walked toward the front door. Stop, my mother hissed. You'll ruin everything. I unlocked it. The cold rushed in, sharp, clean, real. A man stood on the porch, coat buttoned, briefcase in hand. Calm. Waiting. Not an investor. My attorney. Behind him, 2 more figures waited near a black SUV. The room behind me went silent. I closed the door gently and turned back. No, I said evenly. They're not here for you. Lyle stared at me, confusion bleeding into irritation. What is this? I reached under the chair and pulled out the portfolio I'd taped there earlier, heavy, black, unassuming. I set it on the table. It landed with a weight that changed the air. You're waiting for a savior, I said. The lender who kept this company alive when banks stopped answering your calls. My father's face tightened. How do you know about that? Because I am that lender. Silence. Lyle laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. That's not funny. I opened the portfolio. Inside were documents he had never bothered to read. Bridge loans. Emergency notes. Short-term financing agreements, all purchased quietly through layered entities. Every signature at the bottom pointed to the same name. Mine. You don't own the company, I continued calmly. You own the job. My father's voice cracked. This is a mistake. No, I said. This is math. I flipped to the marked page. Change of control clause, I read aloud. Upon appointment of a new executive officer with a documented history of financial negligence, all outstanding debt accelerates. Lyle's smile vanished. What does that mean? He asked, suddenly very quiet. It means, I said, meeting his eyes, that by signing those papers, you triggered immediate repayment. My mother shook her head. That's impossible. I turned the page. Personal guarantee, I continued. Required due to risk rating. Signed by the incoming executive. Lyle looked down at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. You didn't read it, I said. You never do. The room felt smaller now. The walls closer. You owe me everything, I said. And since you can't pay, I take control. The knock at the door came again. This time, heavier. Authoritative. My father sank into a chair. Lyle backed away from the table, breath shallow. You planned this? Yes, I said. Well, you planned to bury me. The crown he'd wanted so badly had already begun to crush him. And this was only the beginning. No one spoke for several seconds. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was feral, the kind that circles before it strikes. Lyle was the first to move. He reached for the documents again, flipping pages too fast, hands trembling now, not with arrogance but with fear dressed up as disbelief. This isn't valid, he muttered. You can't just, this has to be forged. I stayed where I was, hands visible, calm. Call the number on page 4. He didn't. My father cleared his throat, the sound brittle. Why would you do this? He asked, not in anger, but in confusion, like a man realizing gravity had stopped obeying him. I looked at him then. Really looked. The man who had taught me silence. Who had praised compliance and punished curiosity. Who had always spoken about me, never to me. Because no one else listened, I said. My mother stood up abruptly, chair scraping the floor. This is cruel, she snapped. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, name one thing. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Nothing came out. Lyle slammed the binder shut. You're enjoying this. No, I replied. I'm surviving it. The men at the door stepped inside now, measured, professional, unmistakably not here to negotiate. My attorney nodded at me, waiting. You brought strangers into our home, my father whispered. You brought ruin into mine, I answered. The truth had weight now. It pressed on their shoulders, bent their posture. The room that once felt like a throne room looked suddenly small, cluttered with expensive things that no longer meant safety. Lyle's voice broke. You were supposed to be weak. There it was. The expectation. The assumption. The lie they'd all agreed on because it made their world simpler. I was supposed to be quiet, I corrected. There's a difference. My attorney finally spoke. As of this morning, control has transferred. All company accounts are frozen pending audit. You'll receive formal notice within the hour. My father stood, unsteady. You can't take everything. I met his eyes. I'm not taking everything. I slid one final document across the table. I'm taking responsibility. Lyle stared at it. What is that? A severance agreement, I said. For both of you. My mother's eyes widened. You're paying us? Yes, I said. Enough to live quietly. Comfortably. Somewhere else. My father's shoulders sagged. And if we refuse? I shrugged. Then the courts decide. And they won't be kind. The choice wasn't mercy or cruelty. It was relevance or disappearance. Lal pushed the paper away like it burned. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said softly. It makes me finished with you. That landed harder than any threat. Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it closes a door and doesn't look back. My mother began to cry, not loud, not dramatic. Just small, broken sounds. The kind that come when manipulation no longer works. For a moment, I almost felt something twist in my chest. Almost. But then I remembered every dinner I'd been excluded from. Every joke at my expense. Every time I'd been described as a problem instead of a person. The feeling passed. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Take your time, I said. But not too much. I turned toward the hallway. Behind me, Lyle whispered, you planned this for years. I paused at the door. No, I said. I planned it for when you finally underestimated me enough to hand me the keys. I walked out. The house didn't follow. For the first time, it didn't own me. By morning, the story was everywhere. Not my version, their collapse. Headlines didn't mention me by name at first. They never do when the narrative is still convenient. Executive restructuring amid financial irregularities. Founder steps down following internal audit. Board launches independent review. Neutral words. Polite words. Words designed to soften the fall. But behind closed doors, nothing was neutral. My phone didn't stop vibrating. Former colleagues. Analysts. People who had once ignored my emails now writing paragraphs about clarifying misunderstandings. I ignored all of it. Instead, I sat in my apartment, the small one I'd kept intentionally, the one no one in my family had ever visited, and watched the live feed from the courthouse. Lyle stood at the podium, flanked by legal counsel, eyes hollow. He looked smaller without the house, without the title, without the belief that someone else would always clean up his mistakes. A reporter asked, "Did your sibling orchestrate this?" Lyle hesitated. That pause cost him everything. Because hesitation reads as guilt when the public is hungry. "I have no comment," he said. Too late. My father released a statement an hour later. He called me unstable. Claimed I'd been confused about my role. Suggested I'd misunderstood the documents. The market reacted immediately. Stocks dropped another 12%. People don't trust leaders who rewrite reality. By noon, the board requested a private meeting. I arrived early. No fanfare. No triumph. Just a clean suit and a clear spine. The room was cold. Glass walls. Long table. Faces that didn't know me, but knew what I represented now. One of them cleared his throat. "We didn't expect this." "I know," I said. "Your family is irrelevant," I replied calmly. "This is about the company." They studied me differently after that. Not as a problem. As a variable. I laid out the facts. The debt. The mismanagement. The legal exposure they'd narrowly avoided. Then I laid out the plan. Stability. Transparency. Slow repair. No speeches. No drama. Just numbers and accountability. When I finished, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, the chairwoman nodded. "You're not here for revenge." "No," I said. "I'm here for resolution." That word changed the room. Outside, the fallout accelerated. My mother called that evening. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Her voice was thin. Stripped of authority. "They're asking questions," she said. "Neighbors. Friends. People we thought were loyal." I said nothing. "You could fix this," she whispered. "You always could." There it was again. The old reflex. I inhaled slowly. "I already did." She cried then. Not softly. Not strategically. This was fear. "You've destroyed your own family," she sobbed. "No," I said. "I stopped letting you destroy me." Silence stretched between us. Then she asked, very quietly, "What do you want from us?" I closed my eyes. "I want you to stop pretending I owe you my life." She didn't respond. We hung up. That night, I dreamed of the house, empty. Echoing. Rooms stripped bare of meaning. In the dream, I wasn't angry. I was free. The next morning, the indictment dropped. Fraud. Coercion. Obstruction. Lyle was taken in for questioning. My father resigned from every board position he held. The name that once opened doors now closed them. And still, there was no joy in it. Just clarity. Justice isn't loud. It's heavy. And it settles slowly, until there's no room left to deny it. People assume power feels loud. Like thunder. Like shouting. Like a slammed door that finally stays shut. They're wrong. Real power is quiet. It arrives when everything is already broken, and you're the only one left who can decide what happens next. 2 weeks after the indictment, I was called back to the courthouse. Not as a witness. As an option. Lyle's attorney requested a private mediation. The message was simple: he's willing to talk. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Talk had always meant negotiate my silence. Still, I went. Not for him. For myself. The room was smaller this time. No cameras. No reporters. Just neutral walls and a long table with scratches that told stories of other families who thought they were untouchable. Lyle was already there. He didn't look at me at first. When he did, I barely recognized him. No confidence. No smirk. Just a man hollowed out by consequences. "I didn't know," he said immediately. I raised an eyebrow. "That's your opening line?" "The clauses," he rushed on. "The guarantees. The debt structure." I didn't understand any of it. I leaned back in my chair. "You understood enough to push me in front of it." He flinched. Silence pressed down on us. Finally, he spoke again. "They're saying prison," he whispered. "Years. Decades." I said nothing. "I need your help," he said. "You can stop this. You always fix things." There it was. The role they'd written for me before I could read. I studied him carefully. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. And that terrified him. "What are you offering?" I asked. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a confession. A full one. Names. Transfers. Accounts. Everything. Plus a handwritten note. "I'm sorry." I almost laughed again. "Why now?" I asked. "Because you won," he said. "And because I finally understand what it costs to lose." I closed the folder. Here was the truth no one tells you about justice. It gives you choices you never wanted. If I accepted, the case would accelerate. Sentencing would be harsh but clean. No appeals dragging on for years. No backroom bargaining. If I refused, the legal machine would grind him slowly into nothing. I could have crushed him. Completely. The thought didn't feel good. It felt empty. The mediator cleared her throat. "Your decision will significantly affect the outcome." I nodded. Then I stood. "I'll consider it," I said. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I walked for hours. Past cafes. Past strangers. Past lives that had nothing to do with mine. I thought about every time I'd been told to be smaller. Quieter. More useful. I thought about the years I'd spent invisible. And I realized something that surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted finality. That night, I visited the only person who had never asked me to disappear. The nursing facility was quiet. Warm. Smelled faintly of antiseptic and clean linen. He was asleep when I arrived. Older. Fragile. Still here. I sat beside the bed and listened to his breathing. "I did it," I whispered. I stopped running. He stirred slightly. Didn't wake. But for the first time, I felt like I didn't need permission to move forward. The next morning, I called the mediator. "I'll accept the confession," I said. "No amendments. No favors." She hesitated. "You understand this limits your leverage." "I don't need leverage," I replied. "I need closure." The deal was finalized by noon. Lal pled guilty to multiple counts. Sentencing was scheduled. My parents were not spared. Their involvement surfaced. Slowly. Publicly. No dramatic confrontation. Just consequences stacking one by one. I didn't attend the sentencing. I watched the recording later. Lyle didn't look at the camera. He looked relieved. That was the moment I understood the difference between winning and being free. Winning keeps you tied to the battlefield. Freedom lets you walk away. And for the first time in my life, I chose to leave. Freedom doesn't arrive with applause. It comes quietly, like a door closing behind you while no one is watching. After the sentencing, people expected something from me. A statement. A reaction. A victory speech dressed up as forgiveness. I gave them nothing. Because the truth was, the story was already over, they just hadn't realized it yet. I left the city a week later. No farewell tour. No dramatic goodbye. Just a single suitcase and the knowledge that nothing was pulling me back anymore. For the first time in my life, my future wasn't shaped by opposition. It wasn't a reaction. It wasn't a correction. It was simply mine. I moved north. Somewhere colder. Quieter. A place where nobody knew my last name or what it used to mean. I rented a small place near the water. Nothing impressive. Nothing symbolic. Just space. People assume that after something like this, you feel triumphant. What I felt instead was, strange. Light. Like I'd been carrying a weight so long that my muscles didn't know what to do without it. Some nights, I woke up expecting to feel anger. It never came. Other nights, guilt tried to sneak in, the old programming, whispering that I should have done more. Fixed more. Saved more. I let those thoughts pass. They weren't mine anymore. The company was dismantled in phases. Assets sold. Pieces absorbed by competitors. I bought back only what mattered, the parts that employed people who had nothing to do with the war I just ended. They never knew who I was. That was intentional. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted clean hands. My grandfather passed away that winter. Peacefully. I was there. Holding his hand, listening to the soft rhythm of a life that had outlasted cruelty. At the service, there were no speeches about family unity. No lies dressed as legacy. Just silence. And that was enough. Months later, I ran into someone who used to know us. They hesitated before speaking. "You know, your family used to be untouchable." I smiled. Not bitterly. Not proudly. "People confuse silence with weakness," I said. "They shouldn't." They nodded, unsure what to do with that. Neither of us tried to continue the conversation. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the lights across the water flicker on one by one. I thought about the person I used to be. The one who believed fairness had to be begged for. The one who thought endurance was the same as loyalty. The one who confused survival with love. I didn't hate him. I respected him. He did what he had to do so I could get here. Here, where no one asks me to shrink. Here, where my silence is a choice, not a punishment. Here, where I don't need to prove anything to anyone who broke me. People sometimes ask if I regret not destroying them completely. No. Because destruction still ties you to the wreckage. Walking away means you don't carry it with you. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Being underestimated is painful. Being exploited is brutal. But being underestimated while you're preparing is an advantage few people ever recognize. I was never the shadow. I was the foundation. And foundations don't announce themselves. They just hold everything up, until they don't. And when they step away, the truth becomes unavoidable. I didn't win by taking everything from them. I won by giving myself back my life. And that was the only ending that mattered. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.